Hello migration gals, pals, and all in between. Welcome back to Bumblebee, where today we're going to be dusting off some old cold case files and investigating the top 10 unsolved crimes from ancient Greece. Early last month was the 1630-year anniversary of a slain young emperor. When Valentinian I died in 375, his eldest son Gratian was naturally the next emperor. Yet within only 5 days, the Nubian troops and senate decided that the 4-year-old Valentinian II was emperor. His reign was a harbinger of the 5th century, when children or non-entities reigning as emperors were really just controlled by powerful generals and officials in the west and in the east until the mid-century. Arbegos, an overbearing Frankish master of swords, could also be called a master of manipulators, because I kid you not, you Google this guy and the first result is that he's the first to establish a Roman nominee of his own as a puppet emperor. This is a crisis that reached its peak when Arbegos tried to prohibit the emperor from leading his own Gallic armies into Italy to oppose a barbarian threat. Valentinian in response tried to fire Arbegos. The latter ignored the order, taking the dismissal letter and publicly tearing it up, yelling at the emperor that he had not appointed him in the first place. The reality of where the power lay was very openly displayed in that moment. Imagine trying to yell at Caligula like that. A few short weeks later, Valentinian was found in a hemp necktie. Arbegos chose himself to be the sole investigator and decided the emperor had taken his own life. However, ancient authorities and modern historians alike are not sold. It's long since been believed that Arbegos strangled the emperor. Mary Poppins has her umbrella, Deadpool has his swords, and Zeus, a missing sculpture. Hi, you thought I was leading up to a lightning bolt. What can I say? Gotta keep them guessing. The same way that the statue of Zeus at Olympia does. It was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, a collective of architectural achievements the famous Greek historian Herodotus wrote of. Of these wonders, 4 were destroyed by an earthquake, 2 were destroyed by fire, and 1 is still standing, the Pyramid of Giza. But the was is the emphasis here, because with the statue of Zeus, it was either stolen or destroyed. Over 40 feet tall, it depicted the king of the gods sitting on his throne with a scepter in one hand and the statue of Nike in the other, and an olive garland crowning his head. Like the statue of Athena Parthenos, this was a ivory statue covered in layers of ebony and gold sheets. Unfortunately, like the statue of Athena, its ultimate fate remains a mystery, as the statue of Zeus completely disappears from the historical record. According to Roman historian Suetonius, Caligula wanted to have the statue brought to Rome so he could chop the head off of Zeus and replace it with his own, but Caligula got smoked by his own bodyguards before that could happen. Assuming the statue survived Caligula's plan, then it could have been destroyed during the reign of Theodosius I or II. If somehow it still survived, then probably the 6th century earthquakes did it in. Let's meet physicist, engineer, astronomer, inventor, and anti-circle disturber, the mad mathematician. Archimedes of the Syracuse is regarded as one of the leading scientists in all of classic antiquity. He had anticipated modern calculus and analysis by applying the concept of infinitely small and the method of exhaustion, which is a load of jargon for shapes and diameters. Archimedes died during the siege of Syracuse, and our dude Plutarch wrote this in his parallel lives on 2 accounts of how Archimedes died. According to the most popular account, Archimedes was contemplating a mathematical diagram when the city was captured, but it didn't disrupt him. Who cared? What did was the ponyboy Roman soldier demanding he come meet the emperor. Naturally, he declined, saying he had work to do. But this is a siege, you don't just say no. So the soldier just killed him, even though there was explicit rules to not do that. Another story has Archimedes carrying mathematical instruments and killed by a soldier because they thought it was valuable items. Either way, Emperor Marcellus is super pissed by his death, and he is considered a valuable scientific asset lost. As for Archie, his last words were, "Do not disturb my circles," a reference to the mathematical drawing that he was studying when he was disturbed by the Roman soldier. To this day, it's uncertain why he was actually killed. Alright, let's play the circle game! And no, not the iconic Buffy St. Marie song, as much as I'd love that. I'm talking about the super buff Macho Man killed on a Greek island about 2,000 years ago. So, in 2002, archaeologists are doing what they do best, digging up, and they stumble across 57 bodies in a subsection of the Thasos necropolis, including one with a nearly perfect hole in his sternum. Anthroprofessional Dr. Agalarakis said that in his 40 years in that field, he had never seen anything like it. In an attempt to determine the injury, he actually yeeted a bunch of spears at like one of those Mythbuster jelly bodies until he learned it never could make a perfect hole. So the Stryax couldn't have been thrown at the man. Instead, it had to be at close range. It's a clear circular shape that implies the man was somehow immobilized so tightly he couldn't flinch when it occurred. He could have been pressed against a wall, kneeling with hands behind his back, or face down on the ground. It's unclear why the man was executed, but it was probably during a time of political upheavals, perhaps one of the military turmoils around reprisals during the regime change. Dental analysis did show that before the man's death, his diet worsened, suggesting he was a prisoner or a captive in his last days. One of my favorite stories of ancient Greece is the Potsinian Plot. Alright, so I talked about this one in the top 10 messed up facts about Alexander the Great. Let's get more in depth. Pausanias is the dude who shanked Alex the Great's daddy-o, Philip. But Tereza, it says Unsolved in the title. Yes, because we may know he done it, but we don't know the full story. We know it starts with Pausanias and Philip banging each other until Philip finds a new boy toy, who a heartbroken Pausanias ridicules mercilessly. Instead of just saying put him on the table and let's measure, the boy toy tries to prove his masculinity on the battlefield, and promptly dies. Some prick Attalus blamed Pausanias for the moron's death and decided to set him up. Paus shows up for what he thought was a feast in his honor, only to be spiked and bodily violated by Attalus and a lot of other people. Pausanias went to Philip for justice, and Attalus is sent away to Asia Minor, while Pausanias was appointed one of Philip's 7 personal bodyguards. Many believe that his decision to kill Philip was fueled by that resentment, but many people wondered whether he had acted alone or if it was resentment that was purposely fed. Olympias, the first wife, and Philip were repulsed by each other, and her resentment for Philip's newest wife may have motivated her further. Then we got Alexander, who almost immediately after his proclamation had 2 potential rivals killed and ordered the troops in Asia Minor to have Attalus killed. But I mean, Olympias did burn all the other heirs alive and give Philip's widow 3 grieving gifts, which were a rope, a dagger, and poison, so figure that out. Alexander later accuses the Persian king of arranging the killing as a way to end the threat of Macedonian hostility. All we know for sure is Pausanias did do the stabbing, but he definitely wasn't the only player. Ancient Greece produced 10 public speakers so admired for their skill and eloquence that they became known as the 10 Attic Orators. The earliest of them was Adaphon of Romius, a 5th century BC statesman, providing us with some of the first recorded instances of legal cases presented in front of a democratic jury. In the case of On the Death of Herodotus, Antiphon wrote this speech as a defense for Helos to deliver to the jury at his trial for killing Herodotus. The trial probably occurred around 419 BC. Helos was going to go visit his father. Herodotus was tagging along to release some owned people, meaning there were other passengers on board the ship with them. A storm makes them dock, and Helos and Herodotus get terrifically drunk, the lighthouse style. Helos' version of the story is Herodotus leaves the ship that night and just never returns. Next morning they send out a search party and they just never find him. So naturally, it's time to torment some poor people, because ancient Athenian law dictated that the testimony of an owned person was not admissible in court unless it had been extracted via violence. Turns out both witnesses insisted Helos didn't actually do anything, even when they folded to the pain and said Helos had killed Herodotus. They quickly recanted it and said they just wanted the pain to stop. They granted that by killing them. Outcome? This is the cliffhanger, baby. We only have the speech Adaphon wrote for Helos' defense. No record of an outcome for this case exists. And speaking of wild Athenian laws, he cheated, Your Honor. This speech, written by orator Lysias, was titled On the Killing of Eratosthenius, that's a name, and it was meant for the defendant Euphiletios to deliver in trial. The exact date of the trial is unknown, somewhere between 400 and 380. Euphiletios is characterized in speech as a noble, upstanding, elderly Athenian citizen who married a virtuous, sensual young woman. Then at his mother's funeral, Euphilios' virtuous wife is spotted by a handsome man who's her own age that I'm gonna call Erato, who then hit up Euphilios' concubine and convinced her to hype him up to the wife so she'd leave her wrinkly husband for him. Euphilios then describes how he learned of the affair from an old woman who lived nearby, nosy old B-word. He then interrogated his concubine, found out the story is true and that his wife is banging someone who actually wanted her and only her and didn't buy other women to keep in the house. Shocking. Anyways, Euphilios waited for Eratos, and when he arrived, Euphilios and his friends burst in the bedroom and killed Eratos right there on the spot. In the defense speech, he insisted that the killing of Eratos was completely legal because Athenian law at the time permitted a man to kill another man if he caught him in the act with his wife and killed him on that spot. Again, we don't know the outcome of this trial because we only have one speech that was written for it. Next up is the game of whodunit. All of Adaphon's surviving speeches were written for the defendant except one sexist disaster against the stepmother for poisoning, which he wrote for an unknown plaintiff sometime between 419 and 414 BC. The stepson suit outlines how stepmom killed her husband and his friend Philoneus. According to the stepson, stepmom tricked Philoneus' concubine into giving poison to the husband and Phil. The concubine had always been Phil's favorite, but now he wanted to sell to a cheap brothel, and she desperately wished to regain his love once more. The stepmom summoned the woman and became her friend, claiming that she too had lost the love of her husband and proposed a mutual solution, a potion which would restore the love of both her husband and Phil for the owned woman. Win-win for both ladies. The next time the husband and Phil convene, the concubine puts the love potion in the wine glasses, which promptly kills both men. The deaths were treated as suspicious, and the owned woman was apprehended and handed over to the public executioner after being broken on the wheel. The plaintiff never provides true motive for the woman's killings, however, and it's generally thought that among the classicists of the case, the plaintiff's case rests almost entirely on an appeal to the all-male jury members' fear of women, especially their fear of being killed by their own wives. In spite of this, the outcome of the trial is, you guessed it, unknown, because all that has survived of that speech is one. So, you know everyone loves a good cult. Let's check out the elusive yulsilians. The Yulsilian Mysteries are a 9-day early September event commemorating the story of Demeter searching for her daughter, Persephone/Core, for 9 days in agony after she's kidnapped by Hades. Thus, the rites during Yulsilian Mysteries took 9 days to complete. From day 1 through 5, a series of purification rituals, fasting, animal sacrifices, and sacred offerings to Demeter were performed. Day 5 is called the Grand Procession. That's when everybody advances from Athens towards Yulsilias on foot. Hey, Tereza, this is feeling unsolved, not crimey, just wait. The initiatives were then served a drink called kaikion, packed full of Yulsilian Mysteries involved visual performances. Things were said, shown, and done, as scholars speculate that the secret involved an actual killing and essay of a maiden, a recreation of the abduction and essay of Core Persephone. Whatever the initiates witnessed, there are reports that there were people who were in complete shock after the mysteries, and many spoke out that they experienced a transformative vision on their fears of death. Imagine being the reason Greece falls to Sparta, Socrates has to take his own life, and you knock up the king's wife. Well, whoever defiled Hermes was that guy. The defiling of Hermes, one of the worst examples of sacrilege in classical Athens, shocked the Athenians, who immediately appealed for witnesses to come forward with any information, for which there would be substantial reward. Athenian Hermes are four-sided pillar statues, usually with the face of the god Hermes, and they sport an erect, so who vandalized these, and why? Is it irreverence against the gods, drunken vandalism, or a conspiracy against democracy? Alcibiades and his teacher/lover, Socrates, were not actually well loved and immediately fell under suspicion. In fact, Alcibiades was officially accused of being the ringleader to the crime. However, the Athenians knew they had no chance of defeating the Sicilians in the impending battle without him, so they postponed the trial and subsequent death sentence until the expedition to return home triumphant. Upon learning he's gonna stand trial and die for the destruction of Hermes while literally fighting to save these dummies, Al asks himself what the hell is he doing, and he swaps sides to the Spartans, who proceed to decimate Greece. Meanwhile, because all the other suspects are dead, they end up charging Socrates, and he literally takes his own life. So in case you've ever wondered how the ball got rolling for Sparta to take Greece and Socrates to die, well, it's because someone vandalized rock dingles and we still don't know who. Alright, thank you so much for tuning in. I sure hope you enjoyed. Be sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more from us, and until next time, try and unsolve the little mysteries in your life every day.